are you listening to? Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. We have an exciting show that is an update really from a previous segment that we did concerning a school club, an approved school club, Turning Point USA, that had a little bit of an incident and has resulted in some further action that we get to talk with Matt Parkinson and get an update from him. And he is also joined by Matthew Hoffman, who is representing him and is an attorney with the Alliance for Defending Freedom, which is a fantastic organization out there. And I personally am very excited that Matt and the club is working with the Alliance, a fantastic organization for free speech, in particular, religious liberties, the whole range of some of our most core values and civil rights that we have as a country. So let's welcome everybody on, and as well as Carolyn Fippen. She is joining us from someplace sunny.
Someplace very sunny and warm, but not quite as hot as Utah. And on my way out, totally unintentionally, I picked up this shirt and thought that it was the perfect one to wear tonight. So we cannot have USA censored on our podcast, though the schools have attempted to do that in the lovely state of Utah.
Okay, so I have to also say, Matt, before we have you kind of give us the summary of what happened and where you are now, I have continued to learn things about what happened, things that I didn't know. And when we met with you, I think it was back in February, I didn't realize that the school made you remove USA from the title of Turning Point USA, despite the fact that there are numerous other clubs that either have USA or have America in their title, for fear of offending Americans or offending people that think these things are offensive. Carolyn, did you?
Well, no. Oh, no. Sorry. I was just saying, yeah, of course. But I do think it's worth pointing out that when you were in the legislature, Kim, that free speech on college campuses is something that you consistently were working on. And there was significant pushback from our college campuses in the state on this issue.
Definitely surprises. So we have had a lot of focus nationally and in my time on the Hill on campus, college campus free speech, but we haven't paid as much attention to these issues in our K-12 schools, where the body of case law that protects those rights and establishes standards under those rights are typically their K-12 case law anyway. So it absolutely applies. Things like the Davis Standard, Tinker, some of these landmark cases. But let's welcome Matt back on because we're anxious to hear from you again. Matt, summarize real quickly what happened back in February for the people who haven't heard or need refreshing, and then tell us where things are now.
All right. So I'm a junior at Copper Hills High School, and last year I started a Turning Point USA chapter, which I'm still the president of. And we had a table at lunch set up, and it was popular. Everything was going great. And then we were approached by an assistant principal, and she told us to take down a few of our posters because she didn't like them. And so we did, and she left, and we thought the problem was done. And she came back and told us that we no longer had permission to be there and that we were being shut down.
What was on the posters that were so offensive that she didn't like? What was on the posters?
They said, "I'm a conservative, and I'll always love America, and socialism sucks."
Okay, those are horrendous. I think most of us would agree with her. Not really. Okay. So
and then we got brought into the principal's office, and he was talking with us, and he was telling us that he had the power to tell us we couldn't hand out certain posters, and we were never really given a reason why we were shut down, other than the fact that he had the power to tell us we couldn't hand out the posters.
Now, you had a couple of meetings that have been documented, a couple of meetings. And what's interesting to me is that the principal has actually used the right language, but in the wrong ways. He referenced that the school is, the school has to be neutral, content value neutral, and yet that's not right. the government is supposed to be content value neutral. So you had the principal actually tell, I think it is your vice president of the club who said, are we really not allowed to have opinions on things like socialism, communism, capitalism? And he articulated something along the lines of, well, yeah, we have to teach those things, but no, you're not allowed to express your opinions on that. So just absolutely outrageous. And so your materials were taken away. You were told that you could no longer table. Now, tabling is something that's allowed across the board, or has been allowed across the board for all approved clubs. You are an approved club. You didn't just sneak in and start passing things out, but materials were removed physically from students' hands. Your stuff was packed up and you were told that you could no longer pass these things out. And what else? Are we missing anything?
I think that sums it up pretty well.
Okay. So what's wrong with that?
I think it was wrong that our freedom of speech was stomped on. And I mean, no matter what beliefs you have, whether you agree with our posters or not, I think that it's important that every student, especially a group of students that want a voice to represent themselves, they should be able to express themselves.
Now, at one point, didn't one of the vice principals, didn't she also say that if you are to express your opinions, that you have to express all sides and opposing views? How can a person who is in charge of public education of students, where inherent in that is helping students understand the value of living in this free country and what some of those things mean, how could she get that so oppositely wrong? And what does this mean? And maybe Matthew Hoffman can also address how did she miss the boat? Really, where did she get this wrong?
I'm happy to jump in. Thank you. I mean, I can't exactly speculate as to where she got that from, but I think it's very telling that after she raises this ground that you have to, present both sides, which is certainly no legal requirement and would go against the very core of the free speech guarantee, which is to express your own opinions and your own, what you believe to be the truth, not being forced to express other people's views. I think it's very telling that the school district almost immediately pivoted from that to the fact that, that they needed to pre-approve the speech at issue, not that they had to present both sides, because I think that really is an indefensible position.
Okay, so now what you just mentioned, the pre-approval, so that is currently, Matthew, that's currently the situation where the district is looking at putting in place a pre-approval process, or what we really saw at the end of the year. I have students that go to this school, so I know a little bit about this too, is the school would rather have no speech than speech that they are afraid of as being offensive. They would rather shut down all schools than allow this club, or all clubs than allow this club.
Yeah, it's an interesting and kind of a balance, like you said, because the pre-approval requirement as it currently stands gives basically unbridled discretion, standardless discretion to the principal to decide what speech he does and does not like, which, as the facts of this case show, is extremely problematic. So we're reassured to some extent that the school is updating that policy to tie it to some standards, like the Tinker standard that you mentioned earlier. And so that is reassuring. It remains the fact, though, that the free speech guarantees apply in a different fashion in the lower schools, as you said. So unfortunately, that means that administrators have more leeway to censor speech. But again, the cases make clear that the administrators cannot censor speech simply because some people may be offended by the speech. And that's something that we're going to look, for the school district to avoid going forward, because that's, bedrock First Amendment principle all the way, from public areas all the way down to schools.
So Matthew, school's about to start. Are you optimistic that you can start day one with recruitment, with expression, with starting to move your club activities from day one?
I'm optimistic that we'll be able to hit the ground running. And I'm also optimistic to work with the administration if they're willing. But I'm not going to back down if they try to censor my speech like the way they did again.
So I'm curious to this point what the discussions have looked like with the school. Matthew, have you been working with the school, or has that been completely Matt trying to work with the school and receiving kind of advice and guidance from you?
Yes, I've been communicating directly with the school board. We sent, I believe you guys saw the June 8th letter, which requested these certain things, and then in response to that, the school did recognize the Turning Point chapter by its full name appropriately, and then that's how they launched into this process of amending their policies, and they responded that that's what they would do. And so right now we don't have very much contact with them, but we're watching their deliberations on the new policies and what policy will eventually be enacted.
So TP is Turning Point is still the only thing that is on the school's website, so they haven't changed it there. But I would also suggest listening to the conversation of the school board meeting, that I thought they are still really, really missing this. And then my concern is that, the process of policy making in schools can take a long time. They can, we call it slow baking in politics. Can you just delay? It's another meeting. It's a study session. It's can we pull together a committee and discuss what the policy should look like? And next thing you know, Matthew is a sophomore in college, and they're still trying to figure this out. So, what are you prepared to do, and what is ADF's interest in this?
Well, I can say our interest is and I'm a member of what we call our Center for Academic Freedom. So our interest is always to promote free speech, mostly on college campuses, but then also in lower schools in this case. So that's our interest. And, we have, we're a nonprofit public interest firm. So that's basically it. We're motivated by promoting free speech for all. As to next steps, I think the only thing that we can say right now is that we're going to continue to monitor the policy. And we have said, if sufficient revisions are not made in time to preserve speech on campus, that litigation is one possible option. But, we are still watching and waiting to see what they ultimately come up with. And hopefully, it won't need to get to that point. But so in a sense, we have all the options available, but we're not set on any one course, depending on how the school board reacts.
So there's been a lot of spotlight, a lot of exposure about campus free speech violations and restrictions on college campuses. What are you seeing across the country? Is this really an unusual case?
Unfortunately, it's not unusual. We've seen both in colleges and in lower schools. Administrative censorship in this form. On college campuses, a lot of time we see it in the form of speech codes, basically saying, you can't say this, you can't say what someone perceives to be offensive, or things like that. And one of the areas, we do litigation, but we've also advocated for state statutes, I think we were talking about a little bit earlier, that deal with speech on college campuses. One possible area of interest for local people might be now statutes dealing with free speech in lower schools, because those constitutional cases apply differently, but there's nothing to bar state legislatures from promoting more expansive free speech freedoms on lower school campuses. And I think that would be one great area to explore in Utah and elsewhere.
Well, I'm hoping for that. And again, because I did work on the college campus issues, and as you said, that's typically found embedded in speech codes. Where we find it in our K-12 is in bullying policy frequently, and in more conduct code types of things. And so our state bullying law is really very, very troublesome is not very consistent with the Davis standards. So we have a lot of work to do, but I don't know why we've kind of left the K-12 out of it, because really that is where students should be learning that what their civil rights are in this area. And then they're prepared when they go to college to know what their rights are. But after learning what happened with Copper Hills High School, Turning Point USA, and Matthew Parkinson and his friends, it's no wonder this is a problem on college campuses, because they are kind of taught early that they really don't enjoy these rights and assume that they don't frequently. So I love that Turning Point USA kind of helps these students understand. But there's some really amazing students that are involved in this club. They came to that club already having a good sense of their rights, I think, and then for groups like ADF to be able to support that. Our producer had a question real quick.
So I'm just wondering, with the school year starting, is the chess club at Copper Hills going to have to allow checkers players into the club? Are they going to have to push checkers out as an acceptable form of recreation as well as chess?
I don't know. I think Matt's also.
Well, I can say that there should be no form of viewpoint discrimination exercised by the government. As to checkers and chess, I think I'll leave that to wiser minds. But that's a good point of how you shouldn't be able to voice someone else's viewpoint on someone else, certainly.
Although the students do have that range of freedom of expression of their viewpoints. It's the teacher in the classroom that's limited. It's the administration of the school. It's the governance of the school system as governmental entities and governmental agents, that they are restricted and they are required to be more content and value neutral on issues, while students are supposed to be able to freely explore those ideas and express them. And that's what sometimes gets missed. I don't know how this principal actually articulated the exact opposite of what the law says. So just amazing.
Yeah.
And
sorry, but yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, it is the principle of the marketplace of ideas, that students should be free to debate one another with what they believe and share their opinions and try and change minds and recruit new members for the Turning Point chapter. And then when the government officials come in to say, you can't say that, you can't say this, it distorts that marketplace of ideas and kind of deprives it of some of its substance, which is, again, as you said, improper for the government to do.
And I think that it's important to point out, once again, we had Matt on earlier in the year, and he stood his ground with the administrators on this issue. And I think that would be a difficult thing for most young people to do against a room full of adults, maybe not a room full, but an adult or two in an office kind of berating you guys for what you've done and trying to correct you and force you to see the world the way that they see the world. And so you've done a lot, I think, for free speech in Utah. I think that you have put the school board on notice, and hopefully administrators and teachers on notice, that you're not going to put up with this. I think we need more young people like this, because I'm afraid, I told you, I have a son your age. I have a bunch of sons, and I don't know that any of them as a sophomore would have handled things as well as you did.
Thank you very much.
okay, what do you want to leave us with, Matthew? What do people need to know? Matt Parkinson, what do people need to know? How can they follow you? And then also, Mr. Hoffman, let's hear how what other things you're working on that people might have an interest in, and how do people follow you? So Parkinson first.
So you can follow us TPUSA at Copper Hills High on Instagram, and just support freedom of speech no matter what. It doesn't matter what side of the issue you're on. It's important to respect other people's freedom of speech and respect that we have those freedoms to enjoy.
Okay, and how can we find out more about ADF and some of the other things you're working on, Mr. Hoffman?
Absolutely. Well, I encourage everyone to go to our website. It's adflegal.org, and that will give you a rundown of all our cases. We focus on primarily First Amendment issues, so free religion and free speech, as you said, in schools and broader. We also have a Center for Life and a Parental Rights Center, and which focuses on a lot of stuff going on in schools right now. So on our website, it details a bunch of our cases, to read up on. Personally, I'm in the Center for Academic Freedom, so I just do free speech and free religion cases against college. Right now I'm preparing for an argument that is regarding one of these state free speech, college campus free speech bills in Alabama. And the case is at the Supreme Court of Alabama currently regarding a University of Alabama policy that defies the state law regarding speech zones and protections for spontaneous speech. So that's what I'm turning to now. And it'll be an interesting case to watch because it will have ramifications for those other campus free speech bills that were passed in many other states.
Fantastic. This will be very, very hard for the regular citizen, much less a student, to fight this and fight for their rights without organizations like yours to help in. So I was crossing my fingers that ADF would come in. So I'm very grateful for that. There are a couple other really good organizations out there that are trying to help. And I think sometimes that is the nature of the government kind of being that 800-pound gorilla, being that disproportionate power that sometimes they do what they do because they don't think you can or will fight back. So I'm grateful for these kids, sharp kids. They know their stuff. They held their ground, and hopefully the district will come around because I've got kids there. So and this is the next generation. So anyway, Carolyn, you have anything else you want to leave with them? Well,
No, I think we covered it. Unless there are, Matt Parkinson, any other updates or just kind of information that you want to share with us before we let you go?
Not that I can think of right now.
All righty.
Okay. Again, really thank you. And thank you for bringing this to our attention early. We really did have an overwhelming response on this podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Keep up the fight.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us. It's good to be here.
Thanks.
Take care.
So here's one thing I just want to mention. These clubs need help. I mean, they need support. They need community support. So if people can go to their website and give them any kind of financial or in-kind support. Again, these are young kids who are sharp and leading the way. And they've been disparaged on this high school campus.
Yeah.
By administrators, by
Yes.
educators. They have absolutely been disparately treated. They have been disparaged. It's
And I think go ahead. Sorry.
just that it's awful.
And I think it's worth pointing out, remember when we spoke with Matt last time, that the administration had looked at the website and made a lot of really derogatory assumptions or accusations after reading the website. It's clearly political. I mean, it's clearly conservative. And because of the conservative nature of the organization, they started making accusations, if I remember correctly, about racism and that type of thing. And it just seems to me as though we have too many people who listen to and read and pay attention to media from one perspective and really just aren't deep thinkers. And those people should not be running our schools.
No.
They should not be having these conversations with young people based on nothing but supposition, because they don't even understand how our politics ought to work in this country. They don't understand how our country ought to work in
Right.
this country.
And not even just politics, but if people don't understand what their rights are, then how do they shore them up? How do they exercise it? How do they fight for them? So the fact that we have a sitting principal, and by the way, This principal is over almost 3,000 kids, one of the top 3 largest high schools in this state. He oversees more kids than almost any other principal does in this state. And when he doesn't have a fundamental understanding of one of the most basic civil rights, one of the most basic education rights, how is he qualified at all to be in the position? This is a person I do not want having really anything to do with my kids. If you're willing to violate student rights, you are disqualified from being a school leader. And really, I think at what point can these people be subject to licensure review? But at the very basics, you're not qualified if you are willing to. And I don't know what kind of boot camp that would take to send this principal to overcome, because this is not just ignorance. Clearly, it's ignorant. Yeah. Clearly, he's ignorant of the law. But what has come out in this is really internal feelings, I can't really judge what's inside of him, but he has expressed an unwillingness to support these students' free speech rights. And to me, that really goes to a level of professionalism. It may go to character in a professional setting, but at the very least, he is absolutely unqualified to lead children, lead students who he has very actively violated their rights. Gone, out, go find another profession. You shouldn't be in charge of kids.
To your point, when this was pointed out initially, until a heavy hitter was brought in, when this was pointed out initially, there was zero willingness to listen.
Oh, yeah.
And to weigh the evidence brought to his attention and the attention of the administration generally. There was zero willingness.
Oh, absolutely, because that is the nature of government, right? The nature of government is they have their endless staff and their endless attorneys, up to and frequently including a state's attorney general's office. So ultimately, any state agencies or subdivisions of the state can be defended by the state's attorney general office. And here is Matt Parkinson, 16 years old now. What does he do? And these kinds of cases can take years. They can take so much money to defend. And government knows that. Governments know that. That school district knows that he either will back down or he can't afford to fight them anyway. So they will just kind of poo-poo any of these complaints. When we've seen this across the country, we've seen when school districts have thrown parents out of school board meetings, when they actively violate rights. Right now in our state, of course, we've got the issue of inappropriate materials in libraries, and we have board members across the state and at the state level even saying, what are you going to do about it? Right. Yeah. But we also have really good ones, though, too, that are, listening to families.
No, but I was reading, I wish I could remember which state it's in. I want to say Michigan, where there's a library. It's a small town, just under 10,000 people. And apparently every year the citizens have to vote on the property taxes that are levied on them. They either approve them or they don't. And they have a library in their town. Again, it's like 9,700 people. They have a library that had inappropriate children's books. And the people got upset. The library refused to take them down because those books were a part of Pride Month, apparently. And they were on display. And the library refused to take them down, though most people in the town thought that they were unacceptable and inappropriate for young children. And so when they voted just recently, they did not approve funding for the library, which was something like $250,000. I think we could solve a lot of this problem, a lot of these types of problems, if each one of those taxes had to go before the voters every year, even if it were only property tax. The aspects of property tax, that the additional subdivisions taxing authority and dollar amount, if that had to be approved every year, I'm telling you right now, that would never have been approved in Jordan School District. The 23% tax increase that the board voted on and voted to approve. I think it
Right.
was 5 out of 6 voted for it, correct? So I just think you'd see more of a willingness to be responsive to the people if the people were the ones who had to choose on an ongoing basis to give you your money or not. And I understand there's some taxes for which that would not work, but there are others for which it really we ought to have something like that put in place.
But that really
Are
is,
you
I mean,
getting
that is kind of
what?
the segue from our previous episode where we talked about a lot of these taxing entities are seeking to increase taxes. So when you come into this school district who wants to raise one of the highest, I mean, it's a 23 to 26% property tax increase, naturally for me as a taxpayer, I'm looking at the value. Well, first of all, I'm looking at, oh, freak no. Have you paid attention to what's going on to people economically right now? Okay, so full stop right there, but I'm not going to full stop. I'm going to keep going. But then the next question is, what are you doing with that money? And when you are doing this to our students, that you are shutting down their speech, or shutting down their freedom of association, that you are imposing your own value structure on them, and we are struggling to get inappropriate materials out of libraries, and you want to take more money from me, 26% more from me. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, these were standalone things that we got to vote on frequently, then yeah, probably wouldn't happen.
Well, that's right. And can we just point out with the Jordan School District thing, I had heard, and it was mentioned again at this meeting, that they raised taxes just in 2019. And our producer spoke during public comment period. I'm not in that district, so I just observed. I didn't say anything. But our producer made a comment during public comment time, and he pointed out that this was mostly for new employees or moving part-time to full-time. And the issue of increased costs that we're all experiencing right now due to inflation is not even addressed with this 23% tax increase. So guaranteed in another year or two, they will come back again and ask for another 10, 15, 20% increase because, inflation.
But this is a problem that we had with college campuses, and Georgia was a great state that when it was so exposed how much the college campuses, the public college campuses, were suppressing free speech and punishing students for free expression of their speech, that Georgia legislature said, okay, then we don't give you any money for that. We don't pay for that. The public does not get to pay for that. So I'm looking at that too. Now, that's not the biggest reason why we should oppose this tax. There are lots of reasons to oppose this tax increase. But there is this element of why do we want to fund this high school that wants to violate the very number one of the Bill of Rights, and that there's a reason that's number one. It is so foundational to everything else, but we have school leaders, we have school administrators that are so willing to violate their rights. They're ignorant of the law. Their own personal positions have definitely shined through this. They're unqualified. So why do we want to put more money there? And, a lot of us are big supporters of, we want to support our great teachers, but we absolutely don't want to support the bad administrators who
That's right,
who violate student rights. So
yeah, and a system that allows it. Right. I'm so glad that we were able to have Matt and Matthew on tonight for a little update. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. We'll see you next time.